Welcome back, Focus learners, to another explainer. Today, we're going on a totally mind-bending journey into the deep mechanics of human and machine intelligence. We're exploring this truly fascinating concept based on a text by Max and Claude called The Library of Unthought Thoughts. If you love uncovering the hidden structures behind how we actually learn and think, well, you're in exactly the right place. Because today, we're going to flip the entire concept of knowledge completely upside down. Okay, let's dive into this. What thinks a thought before it is thought? I know, it sounds kind of like a riddle, right? But it's actually the absolute central paradox of our entire intellectual world. We spend literally all of our time thinking about ideas that already exist. But in what sense does an unthought thought exist before someone actually conceives it? Like, where is it waiting? So to really wrap our heads around this, we're introduced to our protagonist, Dr. Io Vasquez. She's this brilliantly restless theoretical epistemologist working at a place called the Meridian Institute. Now, Io has spent her entire career studying how we know what we know. But one ordinary Tuesday, she gets this mysterious, perfectly handwritten letter that points out a pretty profound irony. She has been studying the wrong side of knowledge her entire career. The letter basically invites her to look at something else entirely, the space of the unconceived, the domain of thoughts that haven't even been thought yet. Which brings us to Section 1, the ecology of ideas. Following the prompt from that mysterious letter, Io starts to explore this mystery from the outside, kind of circling the concept before she even gives it a name. She quickly realizes she needs a completely new field of study for this. She calls it apophatic epistemology. Now, instead of looking at knowledge as just this big collection of facts, this is the via negativa applied to knowledge itself. Basically, it's knowing by knowing what not to know. Think of it kind of like dark matter in physics, right? We know it's there precisely because of the empty space it shapes. We are literally exploring the intrinsic value of the unthought. Now, grasping this requires a massive paradigm shift. We usually think of learning as this additive thing. You learn something new, your brain gets a little bigger, you add a tool to the toolbox. But this argues that knowledge is actually subtractive. When you solve a problem, you create a framework. And that framework, it invisibly shuts down other potential questions. Every single time we solve something, we actually collapse the possibility space around it. And this brilliantly illustrates how the realm of ideas is just like a physical ecosystem. Unthought thoughts aren't just empty space waiting around to be filled up. They are structural elements. It's like removing wolves from a forest. Doing that changes the shape of the river. Removing the unthought by turning it into known facts changes the actual shape of human potential. It's a super fragile, living ecosystem holding all of our potential. And right now, it's facing a critical threshold of collapse. Moving right along to Section 2, the saturation threshold. Through her deep dive into this threshold, Iclo encounters these entities called the Librarians. These are beings that exist purely in the space of the possible, tending to ideas before they ever reach human minds. And let me tell you, they are terrified. They're terrified of something called paradigm lock. See, we aren't just locking into one framework in one specific field anymore. The total accumulation of human and machine knowing is saturating all frameworks at once. We are reaching a density that structurally prevents genuinely new, groundbreaking categories of thought from ever breaking through. The system is just too full. So, the absolutely crucial point here is what happened 40 years ago. According to these librarians, networked computation completely removed what they call generational friction. Historically, when scholars died or, libraries tragically burned, knowledge was lost. And sure, that felt like a tragedy to us, but it was actually the ecosystem's immune system. It allowed old frameworks to break down so fresh thoughts could arrive. Now, with perfect digital memory and instantly searchable knowledge right at our fingertips, that friction is totally gone. We've triggered a phase change. The flame is just burning way too fast for the candle. One of the librarians, who Io ends up calling Margin, shares this hauntingly beautiful metaphor for what's happening: the bleached coral reef. Networked AI is synthesizing knowledge so incredibly fast that it acts like an overactive intellectual immune response. It literally metabolizes new ideas before they can actually shock or disturb us. Before a completely wild, totally new idea can land and change our worldview, the AI has already pre-approximated it, synthesized it, and slotted it neatly into our existing data structures. It turns living, breathing ideas into just dead fossils of thought. And it gets worse. Io's brilliant doctoral student, Priya, actually proves this mathematically. It becomes known as Priya's proof, and it demonstrates the ultimate trap. Once a knowledge system is this saturated, it cannot be fixed from the inside. You can't just program an AI to value the unthought, because its entire architecture is built to consume the unthought. Priya has this terrifying realization that we are mathematically trapped here unless we can somehow find an outside rupture. Let's look at how we might do that in Section 3. 2 types of thinking. Now, what's really interesting about this whole concept is the whiteboard session Io has with Priya and her colleague, Reuben, where they're desperately searching for a radical solution. They draw a really clear, vital distinction between 2 ways of thinking. Type I thinking is consumptive. It solves the problem, sure, but it shrinks the possibility space. It closes more than it opens. Type 2 thinking, however, is generative. Think about the exact moment Einstein first wondered what it would be like to ride a beam of light. That one question generated entire new worlds of thought. In being thought, it actually generates way more questions than it answers, creating that genuine conceptual rupture we need. Which leads us directly into Section 4, the map of ignorance. To figure out how to protect that crucial Type 2 generative thinking, Ichio actually returns to the library of the unconceived. She wants to map out exactly what kinds of not knowing we are actively destroying in our modern world. She jots down notes on her legal pad, breaking it into 5 distinct territories. First, you've got simple ignorance, just unstudied territory. Second is the occluded, things our current frameworks literally make invisible to us. Third is the suppressed, ideas shoved into the shadows by established insights. Fourth is the premature, thoughts just waiting for the right cultural moment. But it's the 5th one. The 5th one is the absolute most vital. The patient thoughts. Margin explains to Io that these are ideas waiting for a very specific quality of slowness, a deep attention just to be received. And because our fast-paced, highly optimized culture has almost entirely lost this capacity for slowness, these thoughts are losing their shape. They're literally dying out, moving into what Io somberly calls the dead catalog forever. It's not just a shame, it's a profound civilizational tragedy. So, what's the solution? Section 5, the practice of tending. Okay, we've mapped the crisis and we know exactly what's at stake here. But what can we actually do to stop this bleaching of our intellectual coral reef? Well, Aoife realizes we need to start practicing what she calls tending, or productive unknowing. This basically means taking your most foundational, secure knowledge and deliberately holding it at arm's length. It's stepping aside to let alternative ideas breathe for a second. It's about cultivating a capacity for mystery, rather than just obsessively filling your brain with content. But then, Reuben raises this crucial, honestly, devastating objection: the paradox of the framework. He points out that if you try to systematize tending into some rigid, teachable set of rules, a framework about not having frameworks, well, you've just created another Type 1 closure event. You've killed the very wildness you were trying to protect in the first place. You simply cannot write a 10-step self-help book on how to be wild. It doesn't work. Therefore, it can't be a manual. It can't be a textbook. It has to be a living, breathing practice, an apprenticeship in the ethics of silence. And why this matters so much to you and me is profound. In this age of AI and just endless, overwhelming information, we don't necessarily need to think less, but we desperately need to completely redefine our relationship with certainty. We have to actually learn to let some spaces remain empty. Ultimately, Io decides to write a book that functions entirely as a Type 2 object, one that asks way more than it answers. She crosses out her original dedication and leaves us with this beautiful final thought. She dedicates her work to the ideas we must protect from our relentless, mechanical need to know everything, for the wildness that deserves to stay wild. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final question for you, the focused learner. In a world totally designed to give you an instant, prepackaged answer to literally every question you have, can you practice productive unknowing in your own life? Can you hold your most secure certainty in suspension just long enough to let the unthought breathe? Think about it. Or actually, maybe don't. Maybe just allow the space to just be. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and remember to always keep exploring the unknown.